Okay. Is there just an overview on the counterpoint?
Yeah, the counterpoint is the only thing that.
Okay.
Alright, are we good?
Legitimacy of the liberal democratic order is bad versus the wrong evidence indicates it's key to prevent genocide, and more evidence indicates the only way to prevent things like genocide from occurring. It's empirical. You should prove that evidence because it indicates that when we have a liberal democratic order instead of something like an authoritarian government, we're actually able to prevent people from dying and hold the government accountable for what actually occurs. Second is democracy, seeking accountability and rights, and because democracy is the only way that people are able to put checks on the government. In any other world, there will be no check on the government. Democracies are the best alternative. Also, they don't isolate an alternative to democracy, which means you should defer our impact. Now, they say logic of futurism. First, there's no opportunities of the entirety of the when I see specific to futurism in the context of abortion. It's not specific to futurism in the context of democracy or in the context of the way we evaluate impact of future disregard this argument. Second is there are alternate causes, like because the plan does not solve things like theology, the belief in immortality, the belief that we should still sacrifice or preserve life in the future. Third is that looking to the future is sometimes good because we need to be able to plan for certain scenarios like the collapse of hegemony, like the collapse of democracy. Those things can prevent future impacts from happening. There are reasons though that you should still evaluate these kind of arguments. Fourth is there's no link because we don't claim to predict the future, just as the rule of law is equivalent to democracy, that there's a correlation there. We don't claim to actually isolate a specific scenario in which democracy collapses, rather than the decrease in legitimacy would ultimately hurt democracy. Also, be able because of time frame and magnitude, our argument is that the perceptual decrease of the Supreme Court's legitimacy in the status quo at a time when it is extremely volatile due to things like Roberts and Alito and recent controversial decisions would wreck the Supreme Court's legitimacy. That would send an international signal that democracy should no longer be promoted. And in addition, the impact is the wrong evidence in cases it would cause genocide and war. Also, there's no internal link to futurism because it's not the root cause of all harms that would be the case today. And in addition, their focus on the present over the future is grounded in narcissistic individualism that ultimately makes children in the bodies of many color into commodities for the consumption of gay white men belong into the partial geographical assertion sets of reproduction and actually natural impact of most post-industrial exploitations are fueled by high rates of consumption derived from narcissistic investments and activities centered on the individual within these narcissistic contexts of hetero local gay men who hold independent labor from the ideological material class biology based on complex share of attempts for considerable patriarchal organic manipulation and cause across all lines of class. If children are increasingly commoditized in people's right, heterosexual and gay men holding independent vision and purge those sorts of political version of future around women's bodies and ownership over their reproductive health policies. Now they say that the figure of apocalyptic violence is problematic, but mobilization, having the courage to be afraid, unique, motivates action, creates social change, and prevents war. That's Stephen 89. People cannot rise above their condition level along with the paroxysm into full and free wave of nations, but war should give birth to you and only capacity for people to take the wider view. What about fear? Can the horror that you experience be? Can we contemplate extinction? Mobilize us to resist war. Certainly, the moment we become blasé about the possibility of the Holocaust, we are lost. As long as horror remains something we can recognize nothing is word. And the consciousness of horror is our only hope. Horror will enable us to overcome war. We must resist the comforting antidotes that serve ourselves when they have no safe for anxiety. Forwards imperatives can be transcended. We must first know them. If we fail, war will pull us over the brink into Armageddon. And nuclear death images verify the value of life box. And if I don't compare ourselves to fear, it is like an 11 bomb go away. We remain one for security. Nothing happens to the degree of stress we must admit our nuclear anxiety and disease, before which we must find the cure requires that we continually come face to face against the one image involved in this manner. We can break his whole over us and free ourselves and begin new initiatives confronting that death helps us to bring ourselves more in touch with what we can wear most life in life. We find ourselves in no way on a death trip by responding to a call for action. Awareness of these conditions is often the road to transcendence. And additionally, nuclear war causes extinction, loss, and three weapons here, giving possibly for the destruction of all these weapons and culture program itself and such the use can kill millions and beyond any counter countries controlled into global nuclear war, which ends humanity. Escalation would quickly follow, and images of nuclear war help prevent it, as well as scenario plan as 9/11/93. Nuclear war can be readily imagined. It is no, not more, but rather less likely to occur for that reason. The world is well aware that as long as weapons exist, it will be possible to use them. And turn scenario planning solves nuclear war. Harvard Nuclear Study Group 83. Nuclear war cannot be avoided by some reason. Think about it. The catastrophe of war should be committed. To understand how mice or strategists study the possible origins of nuclear discuss scenarios and imagine sequences of future events. Scenarios can help identify problems and knowledge of creating fear. Is not the purpose of the exercise constructing scenarios, reducing likelihood of war. Also, should prefer our impact because studies from paranoia is short-term study. Nuclear study does not appear to be a raging neuroneuroses expectations of war have not shown any long-term secular growth. It's also applies to other arguments about futurism because we have to be able to predict these consequences in order to resolve it. In a specific case of extinction, you should prefer our impact because it leads to normal life. We no longer are able to take, we are no longer able to take ethical action in order to save or prevent the death of the child. But we have to evaluate extinction before any other impacts. Now, the next argument they say is that life is they would lead to a life that is not worth living. But the claim that life is not worth living forms the basis of sovereign power about politics, isolating life that can be extinguished, which turns to common. In 90, the concept of life over living is clearly unethical, one which would involve these implications which lead to that individual in which sovereign power is down. And euthanasia is situated at the interest protection of the sovereign position of life that may be built in assumption of the care of the nation's biological body. Their rhetoric of life that legitimizes the elimination of entire populations in common. In 98, more interesting for our inquiries the fact that these sovereign people of man over life is immediate counterpart to discrimination of virtual knowledge life doesn't have any judicial value and can therefore be killed out the commission of a homicide. The new judicial category of life devoid of value of unworthy life being lived corresponds exactly to their life or almost is being extended beyond limits of the imagined by binding. They say that the future is a fantasy and we encourage the logic that says, well, we don't encourage logic that says, well, we have a counterpart that eliminates all of their offense. They're often self-predicated in a world in which we do not take into account the child, we do not take into account the death of the child in the fetal body. However, our argument is that we would be able to increase access to abortion from the counterpart, not only in the counterpart, which means we actually take into account the specific context of the affirmative plan and don't leave futurism unquestioned. No, now it's not going to be a steady effect for democracy, but democracy is good. First, it solves war, genocide, terrorism, proliferation, and rights assignment. And I like security itself with democratic action, we're going to live in defense of populations and do not fund terrorism, do not build weapons, not construct more environmentally responsible because they must answer their own citizens, their respect competitions of liberty, property rights, and rule of law. And democracy solves towards empirical law and international relations. Manto and Snyder 95. The idea that democracy never works against one another has become an axiom for many scholars. It is as close as anything we come to empirical law and international relations as well as courageous democratization. Broad democracy is key to solve rights. We're going to move to mosquito 3. Political participation appears forced to other dimensions to reduce human rights, abuse of state, to divine as democratic, control, and better human rights practice, the accountability, and full democracy, protect human rights, and constitutional defense, war ethic, confident, violent nationalism. Zechariah 97. Two common mistaken assumptions of democracy are enforced by how many people without constitutional liberties and democracies, concordant national development, war, right possession, without institutions, house violence, without recession, and war in societies that strong traditions. It's easiest to organize support along racial, ethnic, or religious lines. Democratic cases actually be liberal cases without constitutional liberties, democracies, with constitutional qualities. Democracy went to war significantly more than other autocracies in countries not granting constitutional liberals and rights. Democracy brings hypernationally prolonging these democratic cases has little democracy. And finally, democracy promotion is inevitable lack of legitimacy that causes global nuclear wars. While legitimate promotion is also a complex diamond. In 5 economics, we can carry mental health, responsibility, we have supporting deeper stability in the regions of the air, where we only have breathing society, civil democracy, where the rest of the world can move democracy, freedom, the air, where we political standing, sort of problems. That Islam plus desire, democracy, people in the region, value, democracy, not only reflections, we have the case for the world has been opinions on democracy, is on the undergoing kind of reformation with growing momentum among us, which is the center kind of hold of democracy, political reform. We're going to populations are deeply frustrated by these kinds of injustices and the air regimes who can do reform politically. They erupt in the coming years. And legitimacy is vital to the enforcement of plans Smith 9 legitimacy first and public acceptance of meetings, governing institutions, actions, and appropriate power within the established political system, lack of public support, acceptance, and preventing institution from performing its assigned task effectively. Loss of legitimacy could hinder the implementation, and legitimacy is key to solvency. Smith 9 Supreme Court depends on other actors to accept and enforce decision resistance makers. If the Supreme Court statute of legitimacy of an institution is tarnished. Counterpoint.
Review.
The counterpoint has the Supreme Court established a new equal protection doctrine to guarantee that regardless of class, women have a unique right to an abortion, holding that the state has no compelling interest in promoting potential life without upholding Casey. The counterpoint solves the case by codifying women's right to choose within the law. This destroys the subjective conception that women are by nature mothers, child parents, over archaic, and data evidence indicates that we can change the court's abortion jurisprudence by creating equal protection doctrine for abortion status, which has concerning intermediate scrutiny based on KCR and inadequate. The counterpoint's prerequisite to accept this harm and increase access to abortion. The first argument makes the private actor argument. Let's say, like, because they also use the private actor's argument, makes literally no sense. We still evaluate these private instances where abortion would occur. In fact, we once that could actually really evidence that post the counter plan there, abortions would increase and would have better access to abortion, whereas it's ambiguous as to whether or not there are still restrictions on abortion post the plan. Second is you prefer evidence because it's specific and is in the context of the equal protection doctrine, how we need to simply expand it because class is ways is essential issue in terms of the biggest class decides whether or not certain individuals get abortions. Now, next argument is that they say we kill responsibility, but that's wrong. We encourage responsibility. The counter plan will be able to solve the entire case. Ace of point is prior objections to equal protection to apply. The counter plan incorporates a modified equal protection standard that recognizes gender as a suspect class and applies strict scrutiny to it, and the one that views discrimination as a measure of disparate impact rather than anarchy. Evidence explicitly contextualizes the standard and post-case jurisprudence and says that it solves prior problems in the court's equal protection approach. These are daily evidence says that applying equal protection solves all deficiencies of the undue burden standard. If the same results of applying using cases undue burden standard is only the first test the court uses after the counterpoint. Even if an abortion restriction meets the standard, it will fail because the second protection test the counterpoint imposes, and it just doesn't fill responsibility in terms of futurism because we still say that the court we still say that the government should not look at potential life, that it should disavow potential life. Next argument makes the permutation to both. First, it links to our case that the permutation here service plan action by limiting the decision to its facts instead of overruling wishes of voter because Jackson and Fenner links to our overall this is the affirmative and negative action of mutually exclusive communication texture started as assessing precious course opportunities. That's the evidence we want to see. And there's and also there's rollback distinguishing the case decision on the basis of two different scratch that argument. Distinguishing overruling are two separate actions. Distinguishing is less than overruled because of these precedent tech statute and two court standard quality control previous case facts and states not previously similar to different cases is known as distinguishing the presumption of started as can be rebutted when sufficient reasons exist to outweigh the advantage of following the precedent. This is known as overruling. And the next argument is this argument about process. However, agent-based or parent policy question because certain agents are better suited for predictive policies, and the process is often more relevant than the substance of real policy. More in 80 now, policy choices that are local mechanism for the resource code and sort of 1% for community level action movement, jump analytic alternatives, and the pilot is about 10%, maybe 99% in the implementation. And the present policy making education is found in agency implementation. They should shut. In 99, first order effect policy about the new average more than effective of commerce and policy law. It is not because purpose of this, so they feel like it's Congress not really trying to implementation found across knowledge can only came through active implementation policy across the agency level. It's answered their usually evidence analysis for metaphor condensation. This goes affirmative because we actually create a metaphor condensation by saying that we should have equal protection doctrine.
The last argument will be in the non-argument.
So not just cover.
Just the first part's on the
Okay. Do you have anything else in front here?
I mean, I read these analytics, but none of the other.
Okay. You make the argument that saying that there is no value to life provides the foundation for Nazi-like genocide.
Yeah.
How will you mediate between that claim and your claim as per whichever piece of evidence is read on this blue paper that says that absent the fear of nuclear war, our lives are valueless?
I mean, that argument is just that nuclear war has life-affirming features. We didn't say that there's no value to life.
Well, I mean, it says that in order to have a valuable life, we have to attune ourselves.
No, that card does not say that. The card says that there are life-affirming aspects to looking at nuclear war imagery. The Agamben evidence talks about how the rhetoric of that
So,
category.
okay, well then I guess let me ask another question. If life is inherently valuable, then what is the unique advantage to that piece of evidence? What is the unique impact to looking at nuclear war?
I mean, I guess preemptively to answer your arguments about futurism.
Sorry, you just told me that we can never suppose that life has any less value than it does it now.
I never said that. I said that in an instance of a nuclear war, we should evaluate nuclear imagery. It has life-affirming qualities.
Right, what is the impact of life-affirming qualities?
I mean,
Okay, let's talk about democracy. You've made repeatedly the claim that democracies do not go to war with one another. How am I to interpret this claim, given that I live in a country that calls itself a democracy and is currently waging wars on multiple fronts?
I mean, if you consider those wars,
Oh, you don't consider what's going on in Iraq or Afghanistan wars, right?
I mean, it's an extended operation.
Well, that's a convenient distinction, because we've read a piece of evidence by Krishna that says that your author's conception of democratic
Democracies
peace
go to war
is
less than
one.
other countries.
We have read a piece of evidence that says that that idea is the same one that naturalizes and
Right.
trivializes
The problem
wars
is
that
that
are
our evidence relies upon studies that have been done about democracies and how they have gone.
right, but those studies are obviously bullshit. You've just
Well, I
told
don't know
me
what you're talking
you
about.
just told me that those studies only make sense because we don't regard what's happening in places like Iraq or Afghanistan.
Fine, you know what?
as
Call
war.
what's happening in Iraq a war. Regardless
Then what is your
regardless,
argument?
regardless of that argument, democracies do not go to war as often as other, forms of
Really?
political
Let's talk
processes.
about all of the wars that are waged by the United States. We have a war in Afghanistan
We have
right
a war in
now.
Iraq,
We have
okay.
a war in Iraq right now. We've only in the past 20 years invaded every Central American and Middle Eastern country.
That's a ludicrous claim, dude.
Really? The
CIA
Reagan administration was
CIA
the Reagan administration waging war in Central America?
The CIA went in and did a couple of operations, dude.
A couple of operations? See, this is our argument. How do you feel comfortable trivializing the genocide that is visited upon those people simply because it's not a full-scale war?
All right, so we talk